Okay, we're live. Good morning. This is Gray Valoria, aka Social Gray, on Twitter for the Nerd Stalker Media Network. Today, I'm really happy to talk with Abby Curnow-Chavez, consultant partner of the Trispective Group. And if you don't know about the Trispective Group, they're a consulting company that really has this model called the Loyalist Team Model, and the Trispective Group has developed a clear roadmap for creating high-performing teams, which I think all of you want to either be a part or lead. So today we're going to learn more about how to overcome, on the opposite end of the spectrum, toxic teams, and from Abby. And then a little bit about Abby. Prior to joining the Trispective Group, she built a 20-year career as a successful HR leader and a management consultant. And as the senior vice president of human resources at Trizetto Corporation, she ran global human resources for a 4,000-person company. And as vice president of talent management at Newmont Mining Corporation, where she spent about 10 years, Abby led transformation of talent and human capital strategy for the company. So anyway, recently, Abby wrote an article on NerdStalker called The 5 Steps to Fix a Toxic Team. Good morning, Abby, and welcome to NerdStalker live from Colorado, I believe.
Absolutely, Denver.
Welcome. Let's just get into this and let's talk about toxic teams. And can you tell the audience what really is a toxic team in your definition, and how do you identify it?
Absolutely. So, the toxic team, most of us have been on a toxic team. And so they're often not too hard for us to describe or identify. But these kind of teams are the teams where, people are really working against each other, not for each other. They're out for themselves, often have their own agenda and really looking out for number one. There's a lot of, sort of that classic backstabbing, which then leads everybody to be in a place of, I'm going to do a CYA because I don't know who I can trust. And often, for the most part, you make a decision, you don't really trust anybody. The other piece that you see a lot here is you see a lot of gossip. People talk much more about each other than they do, with each other, resolving issues and problems. And then the other piece of this is, and one of the things we have a book that we call the Loyalist Team. And, some of the behaviors of loyalists are really about having each other's back and speaking the truth and putting the hardest issues on the table and really assuming positive intent. And, when you're on a toxic team, you just don't see any of that behavior. And really, you show up protecting, or you show up trying to really sabotage and harm others. It's a really unhealthy environment for teams to innovate and to really achieve results.
Can I ask a quick question? I want to get more into how you fix this, but is in your experience, you've done a lot in both HR and as a consultant. In your experience, can this manifest this as a style of the manager, or is it a overall culture of the company? How do you see this?
That's a great question. So, it is most commonly, it stems from, what does the leader choose to accept or tolerate and expect from the team. And so, you can actually have a really healthy company with a good culture and a manager and or folks on a team that are really, behaving in a saboteur way. So, there's not a hard and fast answer to that, because you can have pockets where it's working great and pockets where it's not. We also can see really healthy teams inside an unhealthy organization or a CEO that's not very effective, right? The team will come together. And, it was really interesting in that we have about 8 years of data that we used from this team assessment that we've used with all of our clients and our teams. And we always went in with the assumption or the hypothesis that said the leader is the number one reason of why a team is a healthy team or an unhealthy team, more or less, right? And what we actually found is that the quality, the nature, the expectation, the accountability that team members have of one another actually has a greater level of impact and influence over the team's success. So in other words, right, you can actually overcome, let's just say an average leader. You can't really overcome a sabotage leader or boss who's creating that kind of environment.
Wow. No, thank you for that response. It just hit me when I was thinking about that and looking at some of the background of teams that obviously, like you said, we've all been a part of it because we could just feel it, right? But we just can't understand it or know how to fix it. So, this isn't, you kind of alluded to that, when we talk about company, we're talking about some big environments you and I have been on, as we talked about beforehand, but this really isn't a big company issue, right?
No. It can be a team of 3, or it can be a huge team, or it can be sort of pervasive inside of an organization. And, in our business, we work with very small companies. I actually work quite a lot with it's a nonprofit. They're trying to do really interesting things with impact investing, and they're a team of around 50. And as an example, right, that's one where when we started working together, their culture wasn't in a great place, the executive team wasn't in a great place. And one of the things that happened, and thank goodness there was a CEO that wanted to lean into it, and really work to address it and make sure he put the right executive team in place. But there were a couple real saboteurs, maybe not intentional saboteurs on the executive team, but they spent a lot of time really trying to say, what kind of organization do we want to be? What type of leaders do we need to show up as? What type of team environment do we need to have? They're a really neat nonprofit doing great things in the impact space, but they could not come together to create a strategy that they could agree on, which is, they were more or less a startup, with, I don't know, maybe 750 million to work with, to give away. It's kind of hard to give away money. But they were struggling to make sure they did it in a way that made a difference. And so they came together, they set a much higher bar for how they were going to work together. They agreed to the team norms that they were going to live by. And then what happened is a couple of them couldn't live by them. And the CEO made some of those tough decisions that needed to be made. One person ultimately left on their own, another had to be asked to go. And it dramatically shifted the team's ability to work together, to execute, to innovate, and to get done what they needed to get done. And, those that were still there were very committed to that high bar for the team.
Like, a question for you about the situation that you obviously, your company and you yourself helped in is was this like a 1-year process, 2-year process, 2-month process?
That's a great question. It took about 6 months for the CEO to get to a place where he and the team and everybody was sort of clear about the expectation. And he had enough, I think, information to make decisions about if people were going to step up to the new expectation or not. And frankly, it was not about anyone's competence, because in this case, it was a very competent set of people that came together that were experts in their field. It was really that they couldn't commit to working together in a way that allowed them to achieve the really important mission that they had. And so, it took about 6 months for that. And I had worked with them multiple times. I did an assessment of their organization with them, gave them all that feedback. And there was a lot of feedback directed at them, that they were a big part of what was sort of creating this culture that they weren't happy with. And then, and then they had to look at themselves. And, in this article that we wrote about toxic teams, the very first thing that people have to do is own it. And so if you're, the leader of a team, a CEO, a founder of a company, there is this, we always say, look in the mirror first and make sure that you understand what role you're playing and contributing to this, because it's never someone else's issue, it's everyone's. And often, the leaders got to look first at themselves.
No, that's good. It's just thinking about a lot of teams that I've been on. Ones that I really felt proud to be a part of, and ones I, really kind of shake my head a lot of times, especially as a team member. Sometimes you feel very helpless.
Yep.
In a nonprofit environment, it's really interesting, actually, and I've been a part of many nonprofit organizations. The board also has this interesting consulting atmosphere around the actual staff team. What did you see in that environment? Did you see some things interact with the board when you were doing the assessment?
Yes. Right. And in this case, it was an interesting one because it's a family, right? It started as a family foundation, and and so there are still many members of the family. It was interesting. I think I have worked with many other nonprofits, or even in the education space, right, where you've got really engaged boards. Anymore, there's kind of nowhere, there is no one that can escape an engaged board. But often what you'll see on some of these nonprofits or even smaller companies and startups is you see these hands-on board members, and they're part of the board because they've got a ton to offer, and they're playing more of an advisory consulting role than maybe than a governance or an oversight role. And so they can really influence and impact the team's dynamic. And then the other thing that happens is often you'll get a CEO or an executive team or a CFO who are just constantly on their heels and worried about making sure the board is happy, and spend more time focused on the board than they spend time leading the people and running the company and thinking about the culture that they're setting. So it's real tricky, at the top of an organization, navigating all those different dynamics.
That's a great example. And it isn't just nonprofits. We could talk about leadership teams that are on top of another leader, right? I mean,
Yes.
Influencing him and him worrying about, trying to look good or whatever.
Or her, of course.
And it's like, it never happened to us. Huh? But I mean, but I think, that's just an example you brought out, which is a really great story of how overlooking organizations, whether they're a board or management teams, could also influence the nature of the team functioning as well, right?
Well, and what I'll tell you, one of the things that we see more pretty much across most organizations is those teams that sit at the top, right? That C-level, those, senior level positions, they tend to struggle the most to get aligned and to be on the same page. And what happens is it just has this massive ripple effect across the organization. That's for big companies and small companies alike. But when you've got, and we will see this all the time, you've got the tech team and the product team, and they can't get on the same page. And, there's this back and forth, or the sales team and the product team, they can't get in a groove, and they're working against each other. And then as a result, everybody else starts to work against each other. And it just has, it has an impact much wider than just, say, the 5 or 6 people sitting at the top of an organization. It ends up affecting everyone.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect, as you're pointing out. Yeah. I mean, it not only top to down and laterally as well, right? So yeah. It's wow. Well, anyway, God, we could talk probably for hours about this.
I know it's one of your favorite topics.
And yeah, maybe if you come to San Francisco, we could talk a little bit longer or do another interview about this, because I'm really interested about high performing teams. That so let's close off the interview, and thank you, Abby. Thanks for sharing a lot of your insights. I think that this will be very valuable for a lot of people who are experiencing that. And you could go to the article to kind of look at some of the things that Abby suggested, and she really talked about it in the story she shared with us today. But it was just kind of like, and if you want to find more, just contact Abby directly yourself. So anyway, how can listeners get a hold of you, Abby, and talk more about this toxic team assessment or assessment you could do for companies.
Yep. So my email is Abby, ABBY, at Trispective Group. It is a mouthful, TRISPECTIVE .com. So that's my email. Also go to our website, trispectivegroup.com. And, would love, I don't think it was in this article, but if you're curious if you're on a saboteur team or not, go to www.takesnapshot.com and you can do a super quick and dirty free assessment to see if you're on a saboteur team that's toxic, if you're on a loyalist team that's super healthy, but it's free. It'll take you a couple minutes. You could have your whole team do it, and just use it as a starting place to have a really good conversation about the health of your team.
And also, you guys wrote a book, right? Maybe talk a little bit briefly about that and what you see in the book and stuff like that.
Wonderful. So our book is called The Loyalist Team, How Trust, Candor, and Authenticity Create Great Organizations. And in that, what we really do is we break down all of our research that tells us there's 4 types of teams that you see in every organization, and you can almost relate any and every team to one of those 4 types. We break down the types. It's really from loyalist, the healthy team, to the saboteur, the team from hell that we've been talking about today. And there are a couple team types in the middle that are in this book too, like those that are super siloed or those that are good but not great. And so if you're interested in that, go there. We've got great tips on what to do if you're a leader, if you're a member of the team. Connects you to the assessments that we've got too. So really our whole goal with writing the book and having these assessments is to let people, you don't have to bring in a consultant to help solve your issues on your team. If you're a team leader, if you're a team member, the tools are there for you. And, be a student of it like you are, Greg, and, love it, learn it, care about it, and you can be the leader that you want to be, and maybe much better than the ones around you. So always strive to that.
Oh, thank you so much, Abby. No, this is wonderful. Thanks for sharing a lot of the information, how to get a hold of you, and look at your new book that you guys wrote as a team. So anyway, I'm going to close off the interview, and thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
Okay. No, good. So that was everyone. That was Abby Curnow-Chavez, consultant partner at the Trispective Group. And thanks for joining us, everyone. This is Greg Valoria, aka Social Greg on Twitter for the Nerd Stalker Media Network. We believe in a better you. So thanks for joining us, and be careful out there. See you, Abby. Thanks a lot again.
Bye. Thanks a lot, Greg. Take care.